very warm welcome. And before I hand over to Venerable Vimala, just to say, especially for the ones who come here for the first time and haven't met Venerable Vimala before, so in a way, you are actually participating in this space, and some of you having come for the last over 2 months, basically in the Sangha of Tilorien Monastery, which basically was set up by Venerable Vimala. The Sangha itself, just before she went into retreat, but Tilorien Monastery would not exist if Venerable Vimala wouldn't have set it up. So she has actually initiated it, or helped to initiate, and over the last 4 years, pretty much building it tirelessly. And it was the last 2 months her first opportunity to actually step back from things, go into retreat, practice, and also have a bit of a rest. So I feel very grateful, and I think many of us, for that opportunity of sharing the Dharma in Tilorien Monastery, and also now over Zoom, which is wonderful. So just for background, when Vimala, she had been practicing meditation for a long time, and initially started off in the Cuenca tradition. And that's maybe also the way we found our link to each other. And she also served at Dhamma Pachota, the Cuenca Vipassana Center in Belgium, for quite a while, before she then decided kind of making a more full-time commitment to the Dharma, already as a lay person, but then also with her visits and journeys to Burma, where she encountered also the possibility to ordain temporarily, which informed, I guess, very much also towards taking up the monastic life as full-time commitment to the Dharma. And she had planned to actually ordain in Myanmar, and who knows if that would have happened, we would not have Tilorien Monastery, but luckily conditions developed in different way. Of course, many conditions coming together. She came back to Germany, where she then ordained in the south of Germany in Anensha Vihara as an Anagarika, and from there set out to Australia, spent time at Santi Forest Monastery, and took then Samaneri ordination at Dhammasara in Perth, which is also related to Ajahn Brahm's monastery, and is also in a way, I would say, influenced by the teachings of Ajahn Brahm as well as of Ajahn Brahmali, Bhante Suchato, and using early Buddhist teachings also as her basis for teachings. She came back to Europe, I believe it was 2014, 15, somehow around that time, spent, I think, 3 years or 2-3 years in a tree house while setting up, helping setting up Samita, the supporting organization of Tilorien Monastery, and kind of from that tree house making this whole project happening until then finally the building was set up. And Venerable Vimala and also Dani and many other helpful hands have made that happen. I mean, literally, Tilorien Monastery was built with Venerable Vimala's hand, at least the interior. So there's a lot of her spirit in it, and it can be felt if you happen to visit at some point in the future when boundaries and regulations are a little bit more loose. And I think it was officially opened in October 2018, and since then people have been coming and visiting Tilorien Monastery. But in the meantime, also Venerable Vimala has been busy teaching here and there in Hamburg, in Ireland, in the US, as well as California, as well as in New York. So, and I think several other projects Venerable Vimala is also managing. So a lot of strengths coming together. And I just can say personally, I feel very fortunate to have met Venerable Vimala actually nearly 9 years ago, before I even ordained, when she was an Anagarika at Anensha Vihara, and I found a lot of inspiration in her example. And I'm very pleased that being here together with you and having the opportunity to introduce her to you, and would like to hand over. And I think Venerable Vimala may wish to do maybe a meditation and then share some of her thoughts as on a path with a heart, and what that may mean to her as well as for all of us. So very warm welcome after a longer speech, but now it's your chance and your voice for us to hear. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Aya. I'm trying to, yeah, okay, I'm here. Well, I'm really excited to see so many of my friends here, and some friends that I haven't seen for quite some time, and some friends that I see every morning for the last 10 weeks. And it is great that you could all come and yeah, and support us as well. And I first of all want to say thank you very much to Aya and Opema and to Amina, because without them I wouldn't have been able to go on retreats. And I haven't had a long retreat for some time because I was very busy with Sutta Central mainly, and also building the monastery after that. And I haven't had time or space to do a retreat. So thank you very much to the both of you, because I'm extremely grateful to the both of you for doing that. I think maybe we can do a little guided meditation first, and then I'll just say a few words afterwards. So if you all want to sit quietly, just sit comfortably and close your eyes. And then it will be about 25 minutes or something like that. Okay. And I usually spend quite a bit of time to just really get comfortable, to get the body comfortable, so you don't have to fidget halfway down your meditation. So first of all, bringing the mindfulness to the body. Especially to the legs, because they get quite a lot of pressure quite often. So just ask your legs, how are you feeling? Are you comfortable? Or is there anything I can do to change? Just see what your legs say to that. If some change can be made to make you more comfortable, then just do that. And then move up to the bottom and see how that feels. And slowly move up to the back. You might want to stretch the back a little bit and then let it go. That way it feels really comfortable. Animals always stretch their backs as well, and it just feels really nice. And the shoulders. You might want to just tense them up for a second and then let go, so they really relax. It's quite often the shoulders take a lot of stress. And see how your arms feel. And you can do the same thing, is just tense them up for a bit, including the hands, and then just let go. And then bring the awareness and mindfulness to the throat and the neck. And up to the skull, maybe the back of the skull. And especially the face area. Because there's a lot of muscles in the face, and it's where tension usually shows. So see if you can relax these muscles. You can always do that same trick, just tensing all the muscles and then letting them go again. When you feel really comfortable and relaxed, just pay attention to the space in the room around you. There's far more space in the room than there are things. We so often don't notice it. And in that space, it's actually quite silent. There's nothing much there, it's just air. How does that feel? And go inside. There might be some thoughts. Just pay attention to the space between the thoughts, where it's silent. And still. Maybe we can see our breath. Don't try to control the breath, or just observe where it is. And there too, there is a space between the in-breath and the out-breath. See if you can observe that space. That silence inside. Just don't want anything, just be there, just observing. You don't have to make anything happen. Just be. Without judging. Meditation is not about going anywhere, it's just about being right now with anything that is there and making peace with that. Be kind to this moment. Pay attention to the silences. Silence between the breath or between the thoughts. How does that feel? We're nearing the end of the meditation. Just take a few minutes just to reflect. What happened? How do you feel now? Do you feel more relaxed now than in the beginning? I'm going to ring the gong 3 times. And at the 3rd ring, you can open your eyes and come back to this space. So welcome back. It's a bit strange sitting like this in front of a computer with everybody muted and I can't hear anybody. I can only see you. It's a bit different feedback from like being in a room. So when Aya and Opama asked me to give a talk, she also asked me if I could give a topic. And my response was that in our tradition, in the Thai forest tradition, you don't really prepare for talks. But I had to come up with a topic, and I really liked this poem, and I don't know where it comes from. Paths with the Heart. It's originally a Spanish poem, but I've always liked that for at least 20 years, I think. And I've always come back to it, and it's such a good representation of what the Buddhist path represents for me. So I still haven't really prepared anything, but we'll just see where we go. Because I started reflecting on this. It's like, okay, giving a talk, and in the Thai forest tradition, you're not really supposed to prepare, but when I'm asked, then my mind automatically starts to prepare. I remember this story that Ajahn Brahm told from when he was in Wat Pananashat, and every Uposita day, and today is also Uposita day, all the monks would come together, and a lot of the lay people from the village as well, and the surrounding villages, and Ajahn Chah would just look with his eyes past this row of monks and then stop at somebody, and that was the person that needed to give a talk that night. And Ajahn Brahm was like trying to not look at Ajahn Chah and just look at the ground, and like in his mind go like, not me, not me, not me. And Ajahn Chah's eyes passed him and was like, ah. And then Ajahn Chah came back again and said, Brahmavamso, you have to give the talk tonight. So, and as he said, there's only so much you can say in a foreign language because it had to be in Thai, and he wasn't very good at Thai. It would be a bit like me trying to give an hour talk in French. It would be a bit complicated. I could probably manage something, but it wouldn't be great. And so he got up there and he gave it talk in Thai, and after an hour, he was like, oh, I'm done, good. And he was ready to get down, and Ajahn Chah said, another hour. So he did another hour, and after that, it was another hour. And he said, well, by that time, there's only so much you can say. So in a foreign language, so you keep on repeating yourself and saying the same thing, and it gets really, really boring. And people were falling asleep, and other people were leaving. And I said, well, but after that, it was a really good exercise. It was a really good training, because after that, there was no more fear of this public speech, with public talking. And I read this article some time ago about people's worst fears. They did this questionnaire and asked everybody what their worst fear is. And personally, I would have thought like, well, people's worst fear is probably the fear of dying or getting a grave disease or something like that. But it was actually the fear of public speaking. And I started wondering about that. It's like, why is that? It's like not that something really bad is going to happen to us, like if we give a bad talk. But there is this thing about its self-image that is so important to us, to have this control over what's happening. And I remember my first public talk, I was 6 years old for our class, and it was about China. And I just can picture the whole thing still in front of me. It was still in the 1970s, and so Mao was still in China, and there weren't many tourists going there, but my dad had gone there for his work, and he brought back all these things, these silken kimonos and lots of slides. We still had slides in those days. So I came to school with this huge suitcase full of stuff, including a slide projector. And I gave this presentation, and I got like top marks for it. But the weeks before that, I like practiced this thing every day in front of all my teddy bears. And they're a great audience. But so even at the age of 6, there was this great fear of failing, of not doing good enough, of having to practice it over and over again to get this really great talk going. And later on, also in the university, I just did all these classes on how to give good talks and how to make. We didn't have computer PowerPoint presentations in those days yet. We had this what's it called, these overhead projectors, and you had to write on them with colored pens. And so I did all these classes on how to do that well. And so there was always this sort of fear of like, I have to do well in this. I have to take extra classes just to make good presentations. And it's something very fundamental to us, to have this fear of this anxiety of not being good enough and not being part of the tribe, or but we were always this so afraid of what people's perception is of us. But we can also, our people's perception is not something we can actually control. Yeah, we can do only so much, but it very much depends on you as the viewer to how you are perceiving what is going on. And we can't trust that. We can't trust our own perceptions, because everybody's got a very different perception. Whatever I'm saying right now will be perceived differently by each one of you. And it's like each one of you hears something a little bit different. And yeah, we really can't trust our thoughts and perceptions, because we all come from a very different history, different cultures, different countries. And there's also, like, I noticed very much in my meditation this time is when I had a very good meditation, that my perception of certain events was very different from when this was not the case. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, but this gives this example of like when I how culture, in different cultures, we can have like very different perception of the same thing. Like what can be very polite in our culture can be very impolite somewhere else. When I was sort of in my late 20s, I had to go to Taiwan for a business trip. And my friend, I'd never been there before. I didn't know anything about the Chinese culture. My friends had warned me, it's like, well, there's certain things that you should never do. And I don't know if this is correct or not, but it's like, one of the things that's polite in our country is like when you come to somebody's house and there's you comment on some things of their furniture or whatever, and if it's nice, and you say that, oh, that's a lovely vase or something like that, and they said, don't ever do that in Taiwan, because they'll feel it's very impolite, because then they have to give it to you. So I went to Taiwan and I had a great time with my friends there, and I came to these people's house. I was invited there, and quite beautiful house. And they had this. I loved, in those days, I really loved Chinese paintings. I think the Chinese art was really, really beautiful. And when I came in there, they had this huge painting on the wall, absolutely magnificent painting. It was really big, about 2.5 by 1.5 or something like that. And so completely forgetting what my friends had told me, I said, oh, what a beautiful one, lovely painting is that. And then I remembered, like, uh-oh, that's a complete no-no. So I tried to change that a bit by saying, like, that painting looks really lovely on your wall, because I was told by my friends that was the correct way to say it. So, so I thought I'd sort of saved it a little bit. But then the next day there was this knock on my hotel room door, and no, they were not there with that big painting. Thank God for that. But they came, and there's like Chinese paintings often come on scrolls, and these little scrolls, and they had this little scroll with a small Chinese painting. It was really sweet of them, of course. And I think they gave me some leeway for being a foreigner too. So it's like these differences in, like, yeah, in our perception of what is polite and what is not polite, or what is kind, what's not kind. Sometimes I say something that is meant as a compliment or something really kind, and then that person feels really offended, for instance, and you just can't know. So our perceptions can change. Like we can't control that, and yeah, we can do a little bit, but we should always just like let go of the results of that, as long as we come from a good place, from a good heart. I saw this some time ago. I saw this little video of an experiment they did in Harvard University, and what they did was, well, it was a conference. And the conference there was a table there where people had to register. On the table was this tablecloth, this white tablecloth all the way to the floor. And there was a lady behind that. And there were some papers on the desk where people could write their details. And this was a conference for psychiatrists and psychologists. And what happened is, like, somebody would come, write in their name, and then the lady behind the counter would say, like, oh, I'll just get you a brochure, just 1 sec. And she would dive behind the table and was out of view for just 1 second. And then another lady would come up with the brochure and hand them the brochure. And nobody noticed that the lady had changed, that it was a different lady from the first one. And after a while, they also started changing it and a man would pop up with the brochure rather than the woman. And even then, nobody noticed. And for us as the on-viewer, it was almost incredible. It's like, how can you not notice that suddenly you're talking to a different person than a second before? And it is something called change blindness, which is apparently a known phenomenon. But these were all psychiatrists and psychologists, and even they didn't notice. So we really cannot trust our perception. And it's just, yeah. So our perception of what is good and what is not good is like, well, it depends. It depends on the day. It depends on, yeah, how we're feeling. One day we have a good day and everything looks rosy, and another day it's, yeah, we were having a day where everything looks just grim, and we perceive everything as grim as well. Sometimes I listen to a really nice Dhamma talk, and I think like, oh, that's a really good talk. I have to keep that one. I have to keep that in my favorites. So I do that, and then I listen to it again like weeks later, and I think like, oh, that was very good. Why did I save that one? So, and in my meditation, I especially noticed is like when you have a good meditation and the hindrances go. And I think all of you here are people that have meditated before, but at least all the people that I know, it's most of you. So I won't have to explain what these hindrances are. But when the hindrances are gone, then, and there is this compassion, then you see the world in a very different way, because then the delusion is gone as well. Well, if the hindrances are there, it's like this veil over your eyes, and there is some delusion present, and we don't see things properly. So we can also not really blame or judge other people. First of all, we don't know their history, and we cannot, our own perception is not accurate either, which can also change from day to day. Like one day we meet a person and we think they're really nice, and the next day we might think they're really annoying. So we can't judge that. One thing that I have often wondered about is like, why do we judge? Like, at least for me, I judge myself much harsher than other people. And I think a lot of people that I know do the same thing. We always like compare ourselves to other people. We compare ourselves to how we were in the past. And Buddha also said is this conceit that we have. There's the word for mind in Pali is mano, and it comes from the word maneti, that's a verb, and that means to measure. And it's always measuring ourselves to others or to ourselves at different times. And the Buddha said that there's 3 forms of conceit there. There's the conceit of, I'm better than you. And that's kind of like the kind of conceit we know in our culture and in psychology as well. Because mainly like being arrogant. And then there's the conceit of, I'm worse than you. And I think in our Christian culture, we sort of seems to think that that's sort of a good thing, that it's sort of being humble or something, to think like, oh, I'm worse than you, and but it's not. Buddha said it's just as bad. It's also, it's a conceit. And then there's the conceit of I'm the same as you. But the one thing that's not left out, or that is basically left out, is the idea of we are all different. We can't compare each other to each other. We cannot say that one person is better than another or worse than another, or even the same. We can only say it's like, well, we're all different and we're all on this path and we're all trying our best. And we can't judge others at all, and we can't judge ourselves. Quite often I also hear people say, it's like, well, I can't meditate because I'm too old, or I'm ill, or there's all kinds of reasons why people say, or I don't have enough karma. That's another one people sometimes bring up. But if you look at people in the Buddha's time, and the people that ordained as monks and nuns and that became fully enlightened, and we have like these lovely collections of poems of a lot of these people, which is actually sort of their own words of how they lived and how they experienced the Dhamma. Then you see, like, they're not all really that great. I mean, there was Angulimala, which was a mass murderer. Well, I'm pretty sure that you're not as bad as that. And if you are, I'm very glad to be on this side of the screen. But you're probably really not that bad. And he could get enlightened. There was a man that was 120 before he came to the Dhamma and ordained, and he became an arhat. Which I also find a bit interesting, is that a lot of these people actually became quite old in the time of the Buddha. So it's not so that, like, it's a bit of a side thing, but it's really not so that in those days people didn't get to, we always think of these days is that people don't get old, but people actually quite often got above 80, 100, etc. So, and they also could get ordained, and they had not the same healthcare if we have. They had all kinds of bodies, and that had all kinds of diseases as well. So it was really, we're nothing different from that. So we can do that as well. One thing I notice, especially also in this meditation at the moment, as if you have experienced some kind of intense suffering, it is actually, it can be very helpful for your practice. Because if everything is just going along just like you want it to, and it's all very nice and well, then you don't have the incentive to really practice, to try and get out, or to try and understand this suffering and what it is, and how to learn to deal with that. So one example, and you will hear that quite often from people who are meditating and who had cancer, for instance. And when we started with the Aisanga, there was a man who came and talked about that, who was suffering from cancer, and he was. He's such an inspiration for me. He still comes occasionally, but of course it's difficult for him. But he has such a bright mind with so much love and and clarity and devotion to the path, and so much happiness in there as well, despite all his pain and despite what he's going through. So I find that really inspiring. A couple of years ago, there was a friend of mine who it was in 2017, and we were just starting for Ajahn Brahmali's retreat that we were organizing. And we sent out a newsletter, and within an hour, one person had signed up, And that was my friend. And she immediately signed up for the kitchen. And that was great because we were looking for somebody who was like really experienced with the kitchen, which she was. And so she was very enthusiastic. It's like, yes, I want to see Ajahn Brahmali, and I would love to participate. So 2 months later, she calls me and she says, sorry, I have to cancel because I'll be dead. So she had apparently terminal cancer, and it was quite advanced, and she was not going to make it for the retreat. So I said to her, like, well, I'd really like to see you before. And she said, yeah, sure, yeah, come over. And so we agreed on the date, and it was quite far away, so I had to stay overnight here. And so I went there, and the person that I met was just about the happiest person I have ever met in my life. And she said, it is just so wonderful. She could let go of everything. She said, I can be Santa Claus and give everything away while I'm still alive and make people happy. And she had so good meditation because she could really let go everything, because it was, the future wasn't there anymore, and she could just be. And that showed to me this enormous power of the meditation, and the power of, yeah, also these adversities, how much they can actually help us on our paths as well. There's also an example of that in the time of the Buddha. And I'll tell the story for those. I know there's a couple of people who might not know this story, and that's the story of Patachara. And she didn't have any bodily suffering, but there's the mental suffering. And I think a lot of us might know that as well. So, and she, yeah, in the time of the Buddha, like there was like, just like India quite often today, is there was these marriages that were organized by the parents. But she didn't want that, and she ran away with this man that she loved, and so she ran away with him, and they had 2 children, like a small boy and just newborn baby. And then she developed this wish to, well, I'd really like to go and see my parents again and show them the children and just make up with them again. So she set off with her husband and the 2 children, and then a big storm broke out, and her husband was struck by lightning and he was dead. So she was there alone with a little boy and a small baby. And so she decided to continue on to her parents' house, because she, like, yes, she couldn't go back either. So and then she came to this river, and it was really swollen because of the extra rainfall. So she said to the small boy, it's like, you stay here and wait for me to come and get you, and I'm gonna go across with the baby and put the baby safely on the other side. So that's what she did, and she found a nice spot for the baby and put it on some nice grass. And then she went back again to get the boy. But while she was halfway in the stream, an eagle swooped down and took the baby. So she saw that and like was completely devastated and started shouting at this eagle and waving her arms. And while she was doing that, the little boy on the other side saw her and heard her shout and scream, and he thought, oh, mommy is calling me, I should go to mommy. So he waded into the stream, and because he was way too small and the stream was much too strong for him, he was swooped away as well. So there she was, having lost her 2 babies and her husband. She decided to go on to her parents' house, but by the time she got there, there was nothing much left of the house, because that was also struck by lightning and it had burned down, and both her parents were killed. So she had nobody anymore in the whole world, and she was devastated, was completely devastated. She became crazy. she took off all her clothes and was running around the streets, and she ran into the monastery where the Buddha was staying. And you can imagine what that must have been like, because there's all these celibate monks and there's this naked woman running around in the monastery. But so they wanted to get rid of her and get her out. But the Buddha said, no, 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 bring her here and give her a rope, wrap a rope around her. So they did that. And she came to her senses when she were with the Buddha. And he talked to her and he taught her the Dhamma, and she became a nun. And I think the Buddha must have known somehow that because of this intense suffering that she had experienced, she would be able to transcend that and become this really great teacher. And when you look through these poems of the early nuns, there was this group of nuns who was really not getting very far in their meditation and didn't quite know what to do until they met Patachara. And Patachara was such a great teacher. She could help these nuns to get further in their meditation. So quite often this adversity can be turned around into something that can help in the practice. Of course, it's very, very hard and very difficult sometimes. Mm-hmm. But that's also dealing with these things is also part of the training. It's not just sitting on your cushion and watching the breath. It's also everything in life and how we deal with that and how we can make use of that. I think some of the previous speakers have already said a few things about the joy of giving, for instance, how important that is in the practice as well. And so other things as well, it's just how we deal with ourselves and other people is very important, and bring that into the meditation. And to learn to understand this process that we are, because we're really just a process. And how that works, how our mind works, and learning how to deal with that. So in this meditation, we're just asked to look at our patterns and our feelings and to be with that without judging it, without just being brutally honest with ourselves as well, because we still have quite often this self-image of who we are. And I think most of us here will probably have this self-image of I'm good, or I'm a good person. And then when something comes into the mind that might contradict that, like for instance, you get some anger or you get some jealousy or something coming up, then the first reaction is to repress that. I don't want that. That's not part of my self-image. But we also have to just not repress that and also not act that out, obviously, but just in our practice, just look at that and be with that. And try and also be a little bit compassionate towards that. It's like, okay, hello, you're part of me as well. And that's okay. And you can be there as long as you need to be. And quite often just to understand these things, to understand where these come from, accept them. And then at some point, they will slowly start to pass away by themselves, and then we can let go. And that is far more powerful than repressing them, because then they always come up again, or they have an influence on us without us realizing it. So we have to really be honest in our meditation. So, and just sit there and just observe what is going on, and just have compassion for anything that comes up. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. Anything that is there right at this moment, and just accept that and learn to understand that. And so that's actually also a bit coming back to the poem that I selected. That's basically for me what it says, and I'll have to find it now. Because I did not prepare that. Okay. So here we are. So Lou, I hope I pronounced the Spanish correctly. Para mí solo recorrer los caminos que tienen corazón. Cualquier camino que tenga corazón. Por allí yo recorro. Y la única prueba que vale es atravesar todo su largo. Y por allí yo recorro, mirando sin aliento. So in English, it's, for me, there is only the traveling on the paths that have a heart. On any path that may have a heart. There I travel. And the only worthwhile challenge is to traverse its full length. And there I travel, looking breathlessly. So especially the last part is for me really about the meditation practice, is just to observe, just to look at this wonder of this process that we are. And just to be with this, especially that word breathlessly, it's there's so much compassion in that as well, is to see things for this is just this miracle that this process is, and just to be with that and allow it to just to be what it is and to understand it, and then it will change itself. There's nothing we have to do to change it, because if we try to change the things we don't like, we're just repressing them and it doesn't work. But just to understand them, that's the main thing. So I think I will leave it at that.